Welcome back everybody. In this video, we'll try to look into use context hook, which is very important to pass the data between multiple components. We looked into the props drilling in the second unit, where parent component will pass the data to the child component will pass the data to the grandchild component. Let's try to simulate the same example one more time. Here, you can see that parent component is calling child component is calling grandchild component, and grandchild component is trying to print grandchild component. Parent component is being called in the app.js. Let's look into the output. This is how it is looking, please. Let's try to pass the data from parent component to the child component. For example, if I take name equals KMIT, this name equals to KMIT is passed in a process of props by using the props, and that has to be taken into the props here. Props, you need to destructure that and try to print it here. Let me try to print that h4, destructure it, props dot name. The name is the prop name which we passed in the parent component. Let's try to pass the same name equals destructure that props dot name. Right now I passed that to the grandchild as well. Let's try to destructure in the grandchild. Grandchild will receive that. Let me name that as a name. Render it, and h2 component, h2 tag. Let's try to name that as in directly the props dot name. This should work. Let's go ahead there. In grandchild. Oh, I need not call that as within props because I already destructured over here with the name. Let's try to render it as is. There you go. Now, what did you notice here? Parent component is passing data to the child component. Child component is passing the same data to the grandchild component. Now imagine there is only the 3 levels here. Imagine there is in component levels of 100 components in between. There's no direct way of passing data from the parent component to the grandchild component. Imagine a scenario, if there is only the one intermediate child here. Imagine a scenario, there are multiple components. Do we have any way to pass directly the data from parent component to the grandchild component? There comes in handy use context hook. Use context provides a way to pass the data through component trees without having to prop down manually at every level or every component. How do I use that? Let's try to create a scenario. Right? So go back. Let's try to create a folder, separate folder. It's up to you. The context can be the different way. The context here is nothing but in the data which I would like to pass. So I would like to group that under one folder, right? So let me try to create an folder called contexts. Context can be different contexts, right? Within this, let me create a context called user context, where I would like to pass the user details, please. This is a component which I created. After creating the user context.js, let's try to create user context, which will be a constant. It's up to you. Equals. How do I create in context then? I want this to be the context to be created. So further, the first step you need to do is create context. Create context is coming from React, right? And write create context. Try to import React since you are using the React. Import React from React. All right. React create context is a function which will be called. Now, what happens? I need to export this first so that I can use it later. Now, create another one. Second step would be providing the context. What is the context you would like to provide? The third step would be the receiver who will be using that context. All right. So let me export that as well. Named exports. Export const user context provider. U, C, and P are uppercases, please. This is my component I would like to create. Equals some fat arrow function, right? Which would take a component where you would like to wrap under this user context. That component would be come to this here, right? Let me call that as in children. Name it anything, please. So what I would like to do, return, this has to return that context. So user context dot provider. All right. Within this, what is a component you would like to wrap under? Try to keep that here. Now, this children, for this component, I have to pass the data. That is the actual context which I would like to pass. Let me pass the value equals to some KMIT. The same KMIT I would like to pass KMIT. Right. The first step is done. We created the create context through this is the first step, and the second step we created the context provider. The third step where it has to be wrapped. That has to be wrapped under index.js where you are calling your app component. So let me try to come to the index.js and try to use the component which we created, user context provider, where we are providing the data, and your app has to be under this. This is the children which we are trying to pass there. I hope you are seeing that, everybody. This app would be acting like as in children in the context provider, where in the context provider, this will be this app comment sits into the children. This app, we are passing the prop called as and the value which you would like to be associated, the value providing we are to the child components is an value equals to KMIT. How do I use it then? You need not pass on through this child components like this. So what I'll do, I will try to copy this and rewrite this again and comment out this part. This is in props drilling one. Let me do it for all the child as well. Copy this again. In the grandchild as well, copy the function and paste it again, comment out the above one. All right, let's come back to the parent component. Now, in the parent component, you did not do anything. So let's directly go to the child component. All right, because there I would like to, I'm bypassing the parent, I'm bypassing the child, and I'm directly using in the child component, right? Grandchild component. So how do I use it then? So in the grandchild component, I did not use this name, right? We use this for the prop drilling. Let me comment out this prop names as well here. Let me remove this. All right, I need not pass it. The parent as well, I need not pass anything. Just make a calls to them. Grandchild is calling. Let me see the output. There, it's a simple one. Let's try to use the context now. Now, how do you use the context? Try to use it by using an use context hook. We created the context by using create context. Now it's time to use it. So use context hook is being used here. All right, use context hook. To this, yeah, you see it got imported. Don't worry about that. Um, what context you would like to use? I would like to use user context. That's what we created, right? User context is a context. So in the grandchild, I would like to use user context. User context, and try to import that as well. And let me store that into some data over here. All right, let's try to print it to see whether really I'm getting the data or not. Then we'll try to use it. Come back. Yeah, you see, I'm getting the data in the grandchild component. Let's try to render it onto the component as well. Comment out this. Let me use that. I can use directly with then. Let me be smaller than the h2. Destructure it by using data. Do you see that? KMAT. You see, parent did not pass it. We created a context and we are trying to use that context in the grandchild. You did not pass between the different components here, which we used to do in the props drilling. I have taken the simple example of a small value here. You can take the bigger data as well. So to do that, let's try to create another bigger one. Go to the use context. Let me create a user context. Let me create an object const user equals something. Let me have an first name as an key. The value is something like John. Last name colon John Doe. An email ID John Doe. One sec. John Doe at gmail.com. All right, John Doe at gmail.com. I want this to be passed. So how do I want this user to be passed to the grandchild so that I can bypass parent, child, and if any intermediate components, right? So what I'll do, copy this part, comment out, and let's pass instead of the value, let's pass the user here. So remove the string part and pass the user object. So in the grandchild, try to use that. The grandchild, try to use it, please. Let's try to destructure that part. Use that, comment it into the data over here. Comment out this part and write something like h3 first name colon destructure that part data dot first name. You know that user context which we passed the user over there, comments it into the data. All right, let's try to console.log for confirmation. Let me comment out this line. You see that there, you see, if I expand this, you'll see the email, first name, last name, all of them. All right, let's try to render that onto the component as well. And comment this part, and copy this and paste it for 2 more times. First name, last name, email. Let's call this as an last name and email. Right, there you go. This is how we are bypassing the intermediate component. The context provider will try to provide the context what you have been built in the context. And the receiver at the grandchild over here will be receiving that data by using the use context hook and destructuring that and using accordingly. So basically, React context provides a way to pass the data through the components without using the props drilling. So where all the use cases of this would be, if you would like to pass through all the components, like who is is the authenticated user or not, or the theme, the theme which you have selected in an Google or any black theme, white theme, or any portals, right? That has also to be passed through, or it has to be set at once, can be used it anywhere, or the preferred language of coding or preferred language of reading some context, then you can go ahead. So I have created only the one context here. It's up to you. You can use any other context as well. I have created the user context. In the context folder, you can create as many contexts you would like to create, those many contexts, please. Let's try to create one more. Let me create another so dummy context. All right, .js. What I'll do, what I have created here for the first one, let me copy that part as well. This part, please. Uh, okay, similar kind of a thing. Value equal to KMIT. Let's try to create in the dummy context as well. Copy this, paste it over here. Remove this part, and my context name should be the what is the context you would like to create. Dummy context. So let me call this as an dummy context provider. All right, and remove this part and uncomment this. This is in dummy context provider. All right, so copy this, paste it over here, and the value equals to KMIT. All right, let me save this as part. Now how do I use it then? Nothing but just wrap in the index.js to the app.js, right? Where is my index.js? Yeah, wrap under this. Okay, dummy context provider. Give me a second. Copy this and paste it over here. As many you would like to write, those many you can create, please. It's up to you. It depends upon the requirement. All right, so let's try to use that in the grandchild again. Let me use another use context like this. Copy that, and this time use the dummy context. All right, dummy context. Let me call this as an name what I'm trying to receive there. Let me try to log it. Console.log. Name what did I receive. This should be the KMIT. Or else what I'll do, copy this before write it over here. H2 name received colon name. All right. So let's look into that. There you go, KMIT. So you in your applications, you can have the multiple context providers, and that can be wrapped on for the app in the index.js and use accordingly. So you can, that's why I created the folder called context. You can create as many contexts you wanted. Depends upon your requirement completely. Make sure that you're not creating any dummy like this. Make sure you are creating the proper contexts. All right. So to overcome the props drilling, instead of passing from one component to the another component, all the level to the down to that in the component tree, we use an context hook. There are three important steps. Important steps are creating the context, wrapping in the provider, and using the contexts. All right. See you in the next video.